Have you ever learned a lot of facts in school but still felt unprepared for heartbreak, conflict, shame, or anger? Have you ever wondered why we spend years training the mind to memorize and compete, but almost no time training the heart to stay steady and kind under pressure? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about a simple idea that has massive consequences. Compassion should be taught from kindergarten all the way through university. Not as a cute poster on the wall, not as a once-a-year assembly, but as a real skill that is practiced, measured, and refined the way we practice reading, sports, music, and problem solving. I want you to hold 2 points from the beginning. First, compassion is not just a moral decoration. It is an emotional and social technology that reduces suffering and improves how humans cooperate. Second, compassion without wisdom can become weakness. But compassion with wisdom becomes one of the strongest forms of human intelligence, because it makes people less reactive, more resilient, and more capable of making choices that do not destroy relationships. Most people do not realize how much of life is not about information, but about regulation. You can know what to do and still sabotage yourself because you cannot handle your own emotions. You can know the right words and still say the worst ones when you feel threatened. You can understand logic and still get trapped in pride, jealousy, resentment, or fear. This is why compassion training is not optional. It is foundational. Think about what kids learn early. Even when no one officially teaches it, they learn how to get attention. They learn how to protect themselves. They learn what happens when they cry, when they get angry, when they fail, when they are embarrassed. If a child learns that emotions led to punishment or shame, they will hide their heart and build armor. If a child learns that emotions led to chaos and no support, they may become anxious and clingy. If a child learns that power comes from domination, they may become aggressive. If a child learns that love comes from pleasing, they may become a quiet doormat. By the time a person reaches adulthood, these patterns are often stronger than any textbook knowledge. They become automatic. They become identity. They become destiny. So when someone says compassion should be taught from kindergarten to university, they are not saying everyone should be sweet all the time. They are saying we should train the human operating system. We should teach people how to notice suffering in themselves and others, how to respond without cruelty, how to repair harm, how to set boundaries without hatred, and how to hold responsibility without shame. That is not soft. That is survival at a higher level. Now let us get very practical. What does it mean to teach compassion in school? It means you teach awareness of emotions as a skill. You teach kids how to recognize what is happening in the body when anger rises, when fear rises, when shame rises. You teach that feelings are not commands. You teach that there is a space between feeling and action. You teach that in that space, choice exists. Then you teach perspective as a skill. You teach kids that other people have inner worlds too. You teach that behavior has causes and conditions. You teach that understanding those conditions does not excuse harm, but it reduces hatred and increases wise responses. Then you teach kindness as a skill, not as a performance. You teach kids how to speak with respect, how to listen without mocking, how to disagree without dehumanizing, how to include someone who is left out, how to apologize, how to forgive without becoming naive. Then you teach boundaries as part of compassion. You teach that compassion is not letting people hurt you. You teach that you can say no calmly. You teach that you can protect yourself without turning into cruelty. You teach that consequences can be firm and still humane. Finally, you teach repair as a skill. You teach that mistakes are not identity. You teach that harm can be acknowledged and corrected. You teach that shame does not fix anything, but responsibility and repair do. If that sounds like therapy, that is because it is emotional education. But emotional education is not extra. It is the missing foundation. Now, some people push back and say, School is already overloaded. There is no time. But look closely at what we are already paying for when we do not teach compassion. We pay for bullying. We pay for conflict. We pay for violence. We pay for classroom disruption. We pay for anxiety and burnout. We pay for broken relationships that affect learning. We pay for teachers who are exhausted because they are managing emotional storms all day without tools. We pay for students who cannot focus because their nervous systems are in threat mode. Compassion rating does not add burden. It reduces burden by lowering friction. Here is another pushback people give. They say compassion is personal or religious. But compassion is not owned by any religion. Compassion is a human capacity. You do not need to talk about theology to teach it. You can't teach it as emotional intelligence and ethical behavior. You can't teach it as the ability to reduce suffering and improve cooperation. You can't teach it as the capacity to regulate impulses, understand consequences, and maintain dignity for yourself and others. In fact, you can treat compassion as a form of practical wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to choose actions that lead to less suffering in the long run. Now, I want to show you how this connects to the deeper themes we keep circling around on this channel. Wisdom, karma, practice, compassion, and destiny. Awakening means noticing the mind before it becomes action. It means seeing the story forming, seeing the impulse rising, seeing the urge to attack or to collapse, and recognizing you have a choice. Wisdom means choosing what is skillful, not what feels satisfying for 1 second. Wisdom is long-term intelligence. Karma means repeated actions create momentum. When kids repeatedly practice cruelty, cruelty becomes easy. When kids repeatedly practice repair, repair becomes easy. When kids repeatedly practice empathy and boundaries, those become the default. Practice means you train the skill until it is available under stress, not only when you are calm. Compassion means you reduce suffering without abandoning clarity. Destiny means the long-term shape of life created by these habits. A compassionate society is not a fantasy. It is what you get when enough individuals train compassionate habits until they become normal. Now let me tell you a story that makes this concrete, because people often need to feel it. There is a school with a reputation for being tough. The hallways are loud. Teachers are constantly correcting behavior. Students feel like they must defend themselves socially every day. Respect is based on dominance. If you show tenderness, you risk being mocked. If you show weakness, you get targeted. In that school, a new teacher arrives named Miss Parker. She is not naive. She knows kids can be intense. She also knows that punishment alone rarely creates wisdom. It creates fear and rebellion. On the first day, a student insults another student across the room. The usual response would be to yell and punish. Ms. Parker does something different. She pauses and says, "We are going to slow down." She asks the class to notice what just happened, not as gossip, but as cause and effect. She says, "When we speak that way, what happens inside the person who hears it?" The class is quiet. Some students smirk. She stays calm. Then she asks, "What happens inside the person who said it?" She does not accuse. She asks. Some students say, they feel powerful. Others say, they feel angry. A few say, maybe they feel insecure. Ms. Parker says, "We are going to learn a skill this year. The skill is how to handle feelings without harming people. That includes how to speak with respect even when you are upset. That includes how to set boundaries without insults. That includes how to repair when you slip." At first, students resist. They think it is corny. They test her. They throw sarcasm. She does not fight them with ego. She holds clear boundaries. She names behavior. She assigns consequences when needed. But her own stays steady. She does not humiliate. Then, she adds a daily practice. Every morning, 2 minutes of quiet breathing. Not mystical, just a reset. She teaches them to notice the body. the jaw, the shoulders, the breath. She teaches that when the body is tense, the mind is more likely to attack. Then she teaches a simple script for conflict. When you feel disrespected, you say what happened. You say what you feel. You say what you need. And you set a boundary. You do not insult. You do not label the person as trash. You describe behavior and impact. Students laugh at first. Then something strange happens. A few students use it. One student says, "When you call me that, I feel embarrassed. I need you to stop. If you keep doing it, I will sit somewhere else and talk to the teacher." The student who was insulting is surprised. The room shifts. Over weeks, Miss Parker teaches repair as normal. If a student says something cruel, they do not get labeled as bad forever. They still face consequences, but they also learn to repair. They learn to say, "My tone was not okay. I was angry. I am sorry. I will do better." That sentence begins to appear more often. The classroom becomes calmer. Not perfect, but calmer. Students begin to feel safer. When they feel safer, they learn better. When they learn better, they feel less threatened. The cycle improves. This is a compassionate intervention, and it is not fluffy. It is practical. It changes nervous systems. It changes behavior. It changes destiny for that group of kids. Now imagine if that kind of training continued through middle school, high school, and university. Imagine a generation of people who can pause before reacting, who can disagree without dehumanizing, who can handle criticism without collapsing, who can apologize without shame, who can set boundaries without cruelty, who can lead without domination. That would change everything. Now, some people might say, kids should learn compassion at home, not at school. In a perfect world, yes, but the world is not perfect. Some homes are loving. Some homes are chaotic. Some homes are stressed. Some parents were never taught compassion themselves. Some families are carrying trauma. Some are working multiple jobs and barely surviving. If compassion is only taught at home, it becomes a privilege, not a universal skill. School can be the equalizer. School can offer every child a foundation in emotional and ethical skills, regardless of background. That is not replacing parents. That is supporting the entire society. Now, let us talk about university, because people often assume compassion is only for kids. But university is where adult identity hardens. It is where people experience intense competition. It is where shame and perfectionism often peak. It is where people develop professional habits that will shape their future culture. If you train compassion at university, you are training future doctors, teachers, engineers, lawyers, managers, researchers, and parents to carry wisdom into their roles. Compassion in a doctor is not sentimental. It is better care. Compassion in a teacher is not weakness. It is better learning environments. Compassion in a manager is not softness. It is better teamwork and less burnout. Compassion in a scientist is not emotional. It is ethical responsibility and humility. And most importantly, compassion in a human being is not optional. It determines whether power becomes service or abuse. Now, I want to address a deeper fear that many people have. They fear that compassion will make them vulnerable. They fear they will be exploited. They fear they will become too emotional. This fear comes from confusing compassion with lack of boundaries. Real compassion includes boundaries. If you teach compassion properly, you also teach self-respect. You teach that caring does not mean collapsing. You teach that you can be kind and still say no. You teach that you can forgive and still protect yourself. You teach that you can understand someone and still hold them accountable. In fact, compassion without boundaries is not compassion. It is fear disguised as kindness. It is people-pleasing. And people-pleasing is fragile. Compassion with boundaries is strong. So, if compassion is taught in schools, it must be taught with wisdom. It must be taught as a balance of warmth and clarity. Now let me tell you a second story. One that shows how compassion education can alter a life path. There is a boy named Leo. Leo is smart but restless. At home, there is stress. At school, he feels threatened socially. He learns that the quickest way to feel safe is to be funny in a sharp way. He mocks others before they can mock him. People laugh. He feels powerful. Teachers call him disruptive. He gets punished. He develops the identity of the trouble kid. He starts believing he is bad. One day, a counselor meets with Leo and does not label him. The counselor says, "I want to understand what happens inside you right before you make a joke that hurts someone." Leo shrugs. The counselor is patient. Over time, Leo admits the truth. He feels anxious. He feels like everyone is watching. He feels like if he is not dominant, he will be humiliated. The counselor teaches him a skill. Notice the body signal. Then take one breath. Then choose a different move. The counselor teaches him how to speak his fear without attacking others. The counselor teaches him repair. The counselor teaches him that being wrong is not death. Leo starts practicing. He still slips, but now he can apologize. He can repair. He can choose a different identity. By the time Leo is older, he is still funny, but he is not cruel. He becomes someone who can use humor to connect rather than to dominate. That shift changes his friendship. It changes his confidence. It changes his future. This is compassion as destiny rewriting. Now, you might be wondering, how do you actually teach compassion in a classroom? You teach it through repeated small practices, not speeches. You teach it through modeling tone. You teach it through reflection. You teach it through role-play of conflict scripts. You teach it through restorative conversations. You teach it through mindful pauses. You teach it through boundary language. You teach it through repair rituals. You teach it through community agreements that are lived, not posted. And you measure it in real outcomes. Less bullying, better focus, better cooperation, less burnout, more academic engagement. Because compassion is not abstract. It changes behavior. Now, let us bring this into your own life. Because even if you are not in school, you are still in training. Life is a classroom. Every relationship is a curriculum. Every trigger is a lesson. So if you want to live the truth of this teaching, you can start today with one principle. Train the pause. When you feel the urge to react, breathe out slowly. Then ask, what is the suffering here? In me and in them. Then ask, what response reduces suffering without abandoning my dignity? Then choose. That is compassion with wisdom. Now, I want to close with a reflection that touches the heart, because at the end of the day, compassion education is not only about reducing conflict, it is about preventing loneliness. So many adults carry secret loneliness. They do not know how to talk about feelings without shame. They do not know how to apologize without ego collapse. They do not know how to ask for support without feeling weak. They do not know how to set boundaries without aggression. So they live guarded lives. If compassion were taught from kindergarten to university, fewer people would grow up emotionally illiterate. More people would know how to be close. More people would know how to be steady. More people would know how to turn suffering into wisdom rather than into cruelty. That is why compassion is not a luxury subject. It is a survival subject. So share in the comments what you wish you had learned in school about emotions and relationships. If compassion had been a class, what would have helped you most? And if you are a student, what would it look like to practice one compassionate pause this week? If you want more long-form teachings like this, support the channel by subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment so more people can find this work. Until next time, keep your heart warm, keep your mind clear, and remember that education is not only training the mind to know more, it is training the heart to suffer less and to help others suffer less too.